November 28, 2024, and Dr. Michael Hayes is piloting a medical transport flight over a university campus in Arizona when he receives an emergency call that a student has been critically injured and needs immediate medical attention. But the nearest hospital is 45 minutes away, and the young man won't survive the transport. What Dr. Hayes does next will defy every aviation regulation and risk his career, but it will also save the life of Charlie Morrison, who was about to lose everything, including his dreams of becoming a teacher. Stay until the end, because this story will prove that sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to save a life. Dr. Michael Hayes had been flying medical transport missions for Arizona Air Rescue for 12 years, combining his dual expertise as both a commercial pilot and emergency room physician. But he had never received a call as desperate as the one that came through his radio at 3:17 p.m. while flying routine supplies between Phoenix and Flagstaff over the sprawling campus of Northern Arizona University. The voice on the radio belonged to Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of emergency services at the university's health center. She was calling every available medical resource within a 100-mile radius because she had a critically injured student who needed immediate surgical intervention that was beyond the capabilities of their campus medical facility. 20-year-old Charlie Morrison was a junior, majoring in education, with dreams of becoming an elementary school teacher, in his hometown of Prescott, Arizona, where he had grown up in a close-knit family that had sacrificed everything to send him to college as their first family member, to pursue higher education. Charlie had been walking across the Central Quad after his afternoon psychology class, when a disturbed individual had opened fire in what would become a tragic campus shooting that lasted only minutes, but left several people injured, including Charlie, who had been struck by a bullet that had caused severe internal bleeding and trauma that required immediate surgical attention. The campus emergency response had been swift and professional, as university police and local law enforcement secured the area, while paramedics provided initial treatment to the injured. But Charlie's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and the nearest trauma center was at Flagstaff Medical Center, which was 45 minutes away by ambulance. Dr. Chen's assessment indicated that Charlie would not survive a 45-minute transport, as his blood pressure was dropping, and internal bleeding was increasing at a rate that would prove fatal, long before an ambulance could reach the hospital, making his situation virtually hopeless unless immediate surgical intervention could be provided. Dr. Hayes listened to the emergency call while assessing his aircraft's capabilities and his current position directly over the university campus, realizing that he was carrying a full surgical kit and emergency medical supplies that could potentially save Charlie's life if he could somehow get to him quickly. The aircraft was a twin-engine Beechcraft King Air that had been specially modified for medical transport, with advanced life support equipment, surgical supplies, and a patient care area that could serve as an emergency operating room, though it had never been used for such a purpose. While the aircraft was on the ground, Dr. Hayes made a split-second decision that would violate numerous FAA regulations and university policies, but could potentially save a young man's life, as he requested emergency clearance to land on the university's main quad. Despite having no designated runway or authorization, the university campus had never experienced an aircraft landing, as the quad was surrounded by buildings, trees, and power lines, creating numerous hazards for any pilot attempting such a dangerous maneuver. But Dr. Hayes calculated that the open space was just large enough for his aircraft if he could execute a perfect approach. As he radioed his intentions, Dr. Chen realized what he was attempting and coordinated with campus security to clear the quad immediately. Students and faculty were evacuated from the area, while emergency vehicles formed a perimeter as Dr. Hayes descended toward the campus, executing one of the most precise and dangerous landings of his career. The King Air's landing gear touched down on the grassy quad, skidding across the uneven surface before coming to a halt, just yards away from the emergency response team that was struggling to keep Charlie alive. Without hesitation, Dr. Hayes grabbed his surgical kit and rushed from the aircraft toward the waiting paramedics, who had stabilized Charlie as best they could, but reported his blood pressure was critically low, and his abdomen was rigid and swelling, indicating catastrophic internal bleeding. Time had completely run out, and the only chance was immediate surgical intervention on site, Dr. Hayes made another unprecedented decision. He would attempt emergency surgery right there inside his aircraft, with the cooperation of the paramedics and Dr. Chen, who had rushed from the health center. Charlie was carefully lifted into the aircraft's patient bay as medical equipment was rapidly prepared. The cramped conditions, turbulence from still spinning engines, and lack of sterile environment made the situation almost impossible. But Dr. Hayes' years of experience in both aviation and medicine had prepared him for impossible scenarios. With steady hands, he performed an emergency laparotomy, locating and controlling the source of Charlie's internal bleeding, using surgical clamps and sutures from his mobile kit, while Dr. Chen managed anesthesia and vital signs. The operation lasted 42 minutes and required every ounce of skill, determination, and courage. Against all odds, Dr. Hayes stabilized Charlie and stopped the catastrophic bleeding, while the university campus outside the aircraft stood in stunned silence, watching history unfold. As news cameras captured the incredible scene of a doctor-pilot performing life-saving surgery in an airplane. Once stabilized, Charlie was transported by ambulance to Flagstaff Medical Center for further treatment, where surgeons later confirmed that without Dr. Hayes' intervention, he would not have survived the transport. The story quickly spread across Arizona and then nationwide, as media outlets reported on the unprecedented emergency landing and mid-flight surgery that had defied aviation law but saved a young man's life. The FAA immediately launched an investigation into Dr. Hayes' actions, as landing on non-designated surfaces without authorization was a serious violation of federal aviation regulations. Yet public opinion overwhelmingly supported Dr. Hayes, hailing him as a hero who had prioritized life over rules. Meanwhile, Charlie began a long road to recovery, undergoing multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. His determination to walk again and return to his studies became a source of inspiration for fellow students, professors, and the entire community that had witnessed the extraordinary events. In the months that followed, Dr. Hayes faced hearings before both the FAA and the State Medical Board, where his decision to land without authorization and perform surgery in non-sterile conditions was scrutinized. Yet in each case, overwhelming testimony from witnesses, medical experts, and even FAA officials concluded that his actions, though unconventional, were medically necessary and ethically justified. Eventually, all charges were dismissed, and Dr. Hayes returned to his duties with Arizona Air Rescue, where he continued to fly and practice medicine, though now carrying the title of hero in both fields. Charlie graduated on time with his class, walking across the stage with the assistance of a cane to receive his degree in education to thunderous applause from his peers and family. He later achieved his dream of becoming an elementary school teacher, dedicating his career to inspiring young minds and telling his students the story of the day when rules were broken so his life could be saved. The incident sparked national debate about the balance between safety regulations and medical emergencies. Aviation experts warned against normalizing unauthorized landings, but medical professionals praised Dr. Hayes' bold actions. Universities across the country began reviewing their emergency medical protocols to determine how better to prepare for critical injuries in the absence of nearby trauma centers. The FAA eventually issued new guidance, allowing for emergency medical landings under extreme circumstances, a direct result of Dr. Hayes' unprecedented actions that November afternoon in Arizona. For Charlie, the experience deepened his appreciation for life and reinforced his commitment to teaching. He often told his students that education is not just about knowledge, but also about courage, compassion, and making difficult choices. Dr. Hayes, meanwhile, continued his dual career, balancing flight missions with emergency medicine. But he carried with him the memory of that day, when he risked everything for a single patient. Years later, he would describe it as the moment that defined both his aviation and medical careers. Not because of the recognition or controversy, but because it reaffirmed why he had chosen both callings: to help others even in the most impossible circumstances, even when the rules said it could not be done. The legacy of that day lives on, not just in aviation or medical journals, but in the lives of students taught by Charlie, and in the countless patients Dr. Hayes has since saved. The quad where the emergency landing took place now features a small plaque commemorating the extraordinary event that showed the world the power of courage and compassion. Each year on the anniversary, students gather at the site to honor both the victims of the shooting and the miraculous survival of Charlie Morrison, thanks to a doctor who refused to let rules outweigh humanity. The story has since been adapted into documentaries, news specials, and even medical training programs, highlighting not just the medical feat, but also the ethical dilemmas faced in moments of crisis. Dr. Hayes has spoken at conferences worldwide, sharing his perspective on decision-making under pressure. He emphasizes that while rules and protocols exist for good reasons, there are moments when saving a life must come first. His message resonates deeply with both pilots and doctors, who understand the weight of responsibility. Charlie, now an experienced teacher, continues to inspire his students with his story of survival. He often invites guest speakers, including Dr. Hayes, to talk about courage and the importance of helping others. Their friendship has become a lifelong bond forged in the most extraordinary of circumstances. Together, they represent the enduring impact of a single act of bravery. The story of November 28, 2024, remains a testament to what is possible when courage meets compassion. It challenges us to consider what rules we might bend or even break when a human life is at stake. And it reminds us that sometimes the right choice is not the safe choice, but the human one. As years pass, the details may fade, but the essence of the story endures. A young teacher who lived to inspire, and a doctor who dared to defy regulations. Their legacies intertwined forever in the history of a university quad in Arizona. Perhaps the greatest lesson is not about aviation or even medicine, but about the value of human life and the courage it sometimes takes to protect it. Classrooms, hospital wards, and even cockpits, this story continues to inspire, reminding us that heroes are not defined by uniforms, but by the choices they make when lives hang in the balance, and that sometimes the bravest act of all is simply refusing to accept that nothing can be done. For Charlie and Dr. Hayes, that refusal made all the difference. In the aftermath, researchers began studying the psychological impact on students who witnessed both tragedy and miracle that day. Many reported trauma from the shooting, but also profound hope from seeing a life saved before their eyes. Mental health counselors incorporated the story into recovery programs for students and faculty, showing that even in the darkest moments, acts of courage can provide light and healing. Universities nationwide began reevaluating their preparedness for mass casualty incidents, with some investing in advanced medical facilities on campus and stronger partnerships with air rescue teams. Dr. Hayes was invited to consult on several of these initiatives, bringing his unique perspective as both pilot and physician. His recommendations helped shape new protocols that would allow faster response in future crises, including designated landing zones on campuses for medical aircraft in emergencies. Charlie, meanwhile, became an advocate for school safety, speaking at events about the importance of preparedness. His perspective as both survivor and educator made his message especially powerful. He emphasized that while we cannot prevent every tragedy, we can create systems that save lives when tragedy strikes. Over time, his advocacy work reached national platforms, including conferences and legislative hearings, where he urged lawmakers to support funding for campus safety and mental health resources. The partnership between Charlie and Dr. Hayes continued to inspire beyond their own communities. They co-authored a book recounting the events of that day and the lessons learned from it. The book became a bestseller, used in both medical and educational programs. To teach about ethics, emergency response, and the power of human connection, film producers soon approached them, and a documentary was made capturing their journey. The documentary received critical acclaim and was shown in schools and hospitals nationwide. Audiences were moved not only by the life-saving act itself, but also by the friendship that grew from it. A friendship that symbolized resilience, hope, and the impact one decision can have on countless lives. As Charlie built his career in education, he carried forward those values into his teaching, encouraging students to face challenges with courage and to care for one another deeply. Dr. Hayes, meanwhile, began training younger pilots and doctors, passing on the lessons he had learned in crisis. His mentorship shaped a new generation who understood that professionalism includes compassion. The ripple effects of their story reached far and wide, touching people who never set foot on that Arizona campus. Because the themes of sacrifice, courage, and humanity are universal and timeless, by the 10th anniversary of the event, their story was firmly embedded in cultural memory, with annual commemorations, books, films, and lectures keeping the lessons alive. Charlie often told his students that his survival was not just about luck, but about a man who refused to accept limitations and chose action over hesitation. Dr. Hayes likewise taught his trainees that sometimes the hardest decisions are the most necessary. He reminded them that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Their intertwined legacies offered a living example of what it means to truly serve humanity. Even in roles as different as pilot, doctor, and teacher, they demonstrated shared purpose. The story continues to resonate because at its heart it is about ordinary people, who in extraordinary circumstances found the strength to do what seemed impossible. And in doing so, they changed not only their own lives, but the lives of countless others, proving that sometimes one act of courage can echo through generations. In classrooms across the country, Charlie's survival was shared as a case study. Teachers used it to inspire students to believe in resilience and compassion. Medical schools analyzed the decisions Dr. Hayes made, highlighting ethics and quick judgment. Aviation programs dissected the landing as an example of skill under pressure. In both fields, the story stood as proof that knowledge must be joined with courage. Charlie himself found meaning in mentoring young educators. Just as Dr. Hayes mentored young doctors, he told them that their work mattered because shaping lives is the greatest responsibility. Dr. Hayes echoed this in his field teaching that saving lives is sacred duty. Their paths, though different, reflected a single truth about service: that true heroism is not about recognition, but about stepping forward when needed most. As the years passed, both men carried scars of that day, but also its blessings. Charlie bore the physical scars of his injury, but also the strength it gave him. Dr. Hayes carried the weight of his decision, but also the pride of saving a life. Together they showed that scars need not be marks of weakness, but symbols of survival. Their story entered not just textbooks and documentaries, but also the hearts of everyday people who looked at their own lives differently and found courage in their example. Parents told children about Dr. Hayes and Charlie as proof that good still triumphs in the world. Students wrote essays about them describing how heroism can appear in ordinary people. Even political leaders cited their case when discussing emergency response reforms, because their story crossed boundaries between medicine, aviation, and education. In Prescott, Arizona, where Charlie grew up, a community center was renamed in his honor, celebrating not just his survival, but his dedication to teaching and service. Dr. Hayes was invited to the dedication and spoke about the bond he shared with Charlie. He said the honor belonged equally to every responder that day, and to the spirit of community itself. For him, the landing was not just about skill, but about the will to act when time was short. As media returned for the anniversary, they found a stronger community, not a broken one. Charlie often said that evil had come to campus that day, but so had hope in the form of Dr. Hayes. And that hope had outweighed fear, because people chose to act with courage. Universities began to honor unsung heroes, creating awards for students and staff who stepped up in crises. These programs were inspired in part by Charlie's survival and the landing that made it possible. Dr. Hayes humbly accepted recognition, but always redirected credit to the larger team, saying that no life is saved by one person alone, but by many working together. Charlie likewise reminded his students that collaboration is at the heart of every success. His own survival was proof that communities save lives, not just individuals. Together, their message resonated widely, inspiring changes both small and large. From the way emergency drills were practiced to the way people thought about courage, their example reminded everyone that heroism is within reach of ordinary hands. That greatness is not about titles, but about choices made in critical moments. And that lives are changed when people dare to rise above fear. Theirs is a legacy not of perfection, but of humanity at its best. As new generations heard the story, they found their own inspiration in it. Some chose careers in medicine driven by Dr. Hayes' example of courage and skill. Others pursued teaching, inspired by Charlie's resilience and purpose. And some entered public service wanting to improve systems that protect lives. The ripple effect of that November day continued shaping lives decades later. For Dr. Hayes, the mission was never truly over. Every flight reminded him of that choice. Every patient he carried was another reason to keep pushing boundaries. Charlie, too, carried the memory daily. It fueled his lessons and guided his values. He told his students that they might never face such moments, but they could still choose kindness and courage. Theirs was a shared message. You don't need a crisis to be a hero. Heroism is built in everyday decisions, in small acts of care and responsibility. It is choosing to help when it is easier not to speak when silence is safer, to land the plane when the manual says don't, because a life depends on it. As Charlie's story spread worldwide, people began sharing their own stories too. Stories of neighbors saving neighbors, of strangers stepping in during emergencies. The narrative of heroism expanded to include countless acts of humanity. And at the heart of each story was the same simple truth. People chose to care. As the years turned into decades, the quad where Dr. Hayes landed became a sacred place. Visitors came not just to remember the tragedy, but to honor the courage that followed. Students placed flowers there during finals week as a symbol of hope and perseverance. New freshmen learned about the story during orientation and left inspired by its message. Many said it made them feel safer knowing people like Dr. Hayes existed, and that they too could rise to the moment if needed, just as Charlie did by surviving. For Charlie's family, the event became part of their identity, a story they shared with future generations. His children grew up knowing their father's life was a gift of courage and sacrifice, and they carried that knowledge into their own lives, committed to helping others too. Dr. Hayes remained part of that extended family, celebrating milestones and holidays with them. Their bond went far beyond doctor and patient. It was forged in shared humanity, and it reminded everyone who heard their story that strangers can become family through compassion. As time passed, the world changed, but the lessons of that day never faded. Technology advanced, policies evolved, yet courage remained timeless. And the story continued to teach that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear for the sake of another human being, and that love, whether for a stranger or a friend, is the force that drives such action. The story of November 28, 2024, was never just about one rescue. It was about a chain reaction of choices that transformed countless lives, and about how one person's decision can ripple far beyond what they ever imagined. It was proof that breaking rules for the right reason can build a better world, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to accept that nothing can be done. Because as Dr. Hayes and Charlie showed us, there is always something that can be done. The world continues to share Charlie's story as a symbol of resilience and courage. Educators, doctors, pilots, and students alike use it to teach the value of decisive action. It reminds us that rules exist to protect, but sometimes humanity must take precedence. Charlie's journey from trauma to triumph has inspired books, documentaries, and speeches, and the lessons extend far beyond one university campus into communities worldwide. Dr. Hayes' legacy continues as well in the doctors and pilots he trained. They carry forward the principles of courage, skill, and ethics instilled by his example. Schools hold memorials and lessons to remember both the tragedy and the miraculous survival. Students learn that one person's action can save a life and change the course of history. For Charlie and Dr. Hayes, the story is not over. It lives through their work, teaching, and advocacy. It shows that courage is contagious and hope can grow from the smallest spark. Every person touched by the story carries forward a piece of that courage, reminding us to act when needed, to value life above rules when appropriate. The story continues to inspire policy changes, emergency preparedness, and training programs. It proves that split-second decisions can have ripple effects for generations. Charlie's example encourages empathy and reminds us that resilience is a choice. Dr. Hayes' actions reinforce that courage requires preparation, knowledge, and willingness to act. Together, their story transcends individual professions, uniting communities around shared human values. It shows that heroes appear not just in movies but in real life, ready to make a difference. The quad where the landing took place remains a symbol of hope and human courage. Annual ceremonies honor the life-saving acts and the ongoing lessons for students and staff. Charlie's survival has become a story of resilience, demonstrating the impact of care and quick action. Dr. Hayes's legacy continues as a beacon for those in emergency medicine and aviation. The story emphasizes that ordinary people can become extraordinary heroes, that decisions made in moments of crisis define not only the moment, but countless futures. Charlie and Dr. Hayes inspire leadership, empathy, and courage throughout the world. Their story is shared in classrooms, hospitals, and conferences to teach bravery, ethics, and compassion. The lessons of that day continue to ripple outward, touching lives long after the events occurred. In every act of heroism, small or large, their example lives on. Their story reminds us that courage is not abstract. It is actionable, visible, and impactful. From a university quad in Arizona to communities across the world, the story teaches us that life is precious and action is meaningful, that sometimes rules must be balanced with humanity and moral courage, and that ordinary people can rise to perform extraordinary deeds. Charlie and Dr. Hayes embody the power of decisive action, combined with empathy. Their story continues to guide educators, doctors, and students toward thoughtful, courageous action. Throughout the years, it has inspired a culture that values human life and courage above all, and reminds us that heroism is often ordinary people doing what is necessary in extraordinary circumstances. Their legacy is not just a story to tell, but a call to action for anyone who witnesses need. Because as they showed us all, every life is worth the risk, the effort, and the courage.